Hello to all our listeners out there, and thank you for joining us for ETR's Macro Survey Findings webinar. While we may have only recently broken out the macro data into its own webinar series recently, this is actually the 15th consecutive quarter that we have conducted the macro survey. As a reminder, each survey is accompanied by a comprehensive data findings report, and the entire survey and data visualization dashboards are currently available on the ETR platform. In addition, the ETR Insights team is continually hosting qualitative discussions with our ITDM community to provide end-user feedback and analysis around the enterprise technology trends that our data uncovers. Every one of our interviews has a full transcript, video replay, and executive summary, all of which feed our comprehensive and searchable ETR Insights library, also available on the ETR platform. As always, you can reach out to us at service@etr.ai to request any of our proprietary research or to get started on your own custom surveys and bespoke requests. Okay, with that out of the way, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Eric Bradley, and I am joined today by my ETR research analyst colleagues, Dr. Darren Brabham and Jake Fabrizio, who will be doing the majority of the analysis on this call. Now, without further ado, let's kick off the April 2023 macro survey data. As mentioned, for 15 consecutive quarters, the Macro Views survey has been consistently tracking and updating core macro trends like budget growth and spending priorities, but has also remained agile enough to expand its scope based on current conditions and client demand. This April 2023 survey period opened up in the first week of March and closed just a week ago today. And yet again, ETR broke a new record for survey respondents. This time we captured record participation from 1,696 IT decision makers, including nearly 60% of the Fortune 500. Just shy of 1/3 of responses came from the C-suite level, and we continue to thoughtfully organize our IT respondent community to represent a diverse cross-section of industry verticals. The high-budget sectors of IT telco, services consulting, and financials insurance combine for roughly half of the respondents and are purposefully curated to capture large swaths of enterprise IT dollars. Lastly, the survey respondent breakdown by enterprise size is represented by 65% large enterprises and 35% mid to small enterprises. Now I'm going to pass the mic over to the harmonious vocals of Dr. Darren to dig deeper into the data, beginning with overall IT spending projections.
Now to the main headline about IT spending. It keeps looking gloomier, frankly, with IT spending estimates revised notably lower in each of the slices of this question that we asked our community members. The 2023 Q2 projection is at just 2.3% growth in spending, but that's down from an estimated 3.6% growth that respondents indicated 3 months ago. For Q3 of 2023, our IT decision makers estimate 3.3% growth in IT spending, and for 2023, total IT spending is estimated to be up just 3.6% compared to 2022 spend. This full year budget number has dropped a full percentage point over each of the last couple of surveys. Let's take a closer look at which respondent subsamples in our survey have the most optimistic and pessimistic outlooks for IT spending. Focusing in on total 2023 estimates compared to total 2022 IT spend, we see some segments are in fact showing more resilience and optimism than others. By enterprise size, it's the small and mid-size organizations planning the biggest increases in IT spending, and they've revised their spending estimates down by a slimmer margin since last survey when you compare that to the large organizations and big index firms. The energy and utilities industry is aiming not only for the biggest growth in IT spending when you look at industry verticals, but they've even revised their estimates up since last survey. All other industry verticals have revised their spend downward, however. And by region, the EMEA region revised their outlook in IT spending downward considerably since last survey, and North American organizations also revised downward slightly, but APAC organizations have grown in their IT spending optimism this survey and are now the regional subsample with generally the most rosy outlook for 2023.
Thank you, Darren. Moving on to spending decrease plans. This model shows the primary spending decrease method for survey respondents that indicated that they are cutting IT spending in Q2 23 versus Q2 22. Among those that are anticipating a decline, delaying or stopping new projects and reducing staffing costs are the most commonly utilized methods to achieve that decrease in budget. Reduction in consulting and outsourcing, and reduction in hardware and CapEx spend were also commonly cited responses. Historical data is not available in this view because we added and enhanced several answer options for this question. In past macro views iterations, consolidating redundant vendors and reducing and optimizing cloud and SaaS resources were the primary methods cited to achieve a budget decrease. According to the latest data, some organizations still plan to use these methods, but a smaller proportion, from 6 to 9%. Qualitative commentary from ETR Insights interviews supports the data presented here, with many organizations employing a combination of these techniques and simply doing what they can to reel in the budget without affecting business-critical projects or productivity. Now we're taking a look at organizational changes over the past 3 months. We've been tracking this data, these trends here, for a few years now, originally in response to changes brought on in the business environment due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In this particular zoom of the data, it's tough to see the widespread volatility over time as industry reacted to everything that was going on. What you can see towards the right of the screen, however, is that things have stabilized to a large degree by now, and that the most recent survey data falls largely in line with the data set for this particular question from 3 months ago. Here you can see that IT projects, whether accelerating or halting them, and hiring and firing trends are all stable survey over survey. Meanwhile, canceling business trips saw the biggest move, reversing last year's growth trend and dropping from 21% to 17% in the last 3 months. I'll be brief here as not much has changed in several sequential surveys. We can see that the workforce continues its crawl towards in-office models, but that hybrid work still reigns supreme as the dominant and most consistent option across all organizations, with 42% of citations. Meanwhile, 28% of employees are currently working fully remote and 29% are fully in office. Projections point to a slightly lower proportion of full-time remote employees and a slightly higher proportion of in-office employees, though the long-term shift appears relatively small in magnitude. Now, I'll hand it back over to my colleague, Dr. Brabham, to discuss sector-specific priorities.
At the beginning of the year, we hosted a series of interviews with IT leaders to get their insight on the top tech trends to expect in 2023. Based on some of the hot topics that emerged in those conversations, we put those trends into survey form to hear how our broader ETR community in general was planning to prioritize around these initiatives in the coming year. We found zero trust security was the top priority among this group of trends, with real-time streaming data analytics, edge computing, and adaptive AI clustered behind in the second, third, and fourth positions. Our 2023 Tech Trends panelists thought it was maybe a little too early for quantum computing to be a mainstream enterprise priority yet, and they felt blockchain and the metaverse were overhyped buzzwords without clear business use cases for most organizations, and our survey takers tended to agree, ranking these 3 topics as the lowest priorities, with, notably, the much-hyped metaverse in last place. Focusing just on information security, it's identity and access management and vulnerability management that are the top security priorities for most organizations, followed by endpoint detection and response, or EDR, XDR. Web application security is the lowest priority of the security topics listed for our survey takers. Focusing to just the analytics, BI, big data sector, we find that the business intelligence and reporting is the clear top priority. Developing big data platforms, data preparation and ETL pipelines, and data catalogs and governance frameworks are next in line as priorities. Streaming analytics, which was the only analytics-related topic in the top trends slate of options, was ranked highly as a trend for 2023. But interestingly, when you ask survey takers to think about priorities within their analytics practice, streaming analytics takes a back seat to the more basic foundational activities that, frankly, are required to make streaming analytics possible. So this is not an entirely surprising contradiction here then, and it's a reminder of how many organizations are still on the journey towards standardized reporting, self-service BI, and good quality data and governance that have been on the roadmap for several years now. OpenAI's ChatGPT started making serious headlines at the end of 2022, and it has seemed to usher in quite a lot of enthusiasm and investment in generative AI and large language models, or LLMs, in the few months since. We included OpenAI for the first time in our February 2023 Emerging Technology Survey, and we saw jaw-dropping evaluation rates from our ETR community. So we wanted to know in this April 2023 Macro Views survey exactly how organizations are evaluating generative AI for business use cases. Slightly more than half still say they're not evaluating generative AI technologies in their business. However, among those who are evaluating the technology, customer support and text and data summarization were the top business use cases. Code generation and documentation and writing content for marketing and sales copy were also cited with some regularity. Evaluating generative AI for image editing and design was the least common choice among those evaluating generative AI. Time will tell if the surge in interest and high evaluation rates for companies like OpenAI will convert to true utilization for enterprise-scale use cases, but if we had to guess, it's generative AI's value in assisting in writing and coding that might help it first become cemented in organizations long term. We'll keep an eye on this trend, of course, as it develops.
Thank you, Darren. The next 4 slides originated directly from client requests, but were further improved upon by our own analytics team. Before we dive in, let this be a reminder that we are always listening to our client feedback. Please don't be shy in reaching out to us with your research needs or suggestions. We are listening. Now, moving on to the vendor-specific macro thesis crossover data, the ETR analytics team created a sliding scale to see how individual vendors within their respective sectors would be impacted by shifting IT budgets. The underlying basis is to see how vendor net scores correlate with survey respondents planning negative spend, flat spend, or positive spend, with a focus on second quarter 2023 versus second quarter 2022. In these slides, we further break down the analysis into 4 sections categorized by total citations to the spending respondent group by sector, to optimally pair larger citation vendors with their respective peers and vice versa for smaller citation vendors. On to the analysis. Here, we highlight those vendors that see ascending net scores among respondents with negative, flat, and positive year-over-year IT spend change, which is why you are seeing 3 different net scores for each of the vendors listed, from left to right. A net score rating among those respondents citing negative spending, a net score rating from respondents with flat spending, and a net score rating from respondents with positive spending. Now here in this first slide, we begin with the largest citation grouping, where the results show many Microsoft offerings seeing ascending net scores among these Q2 spend profiles, as do SaaS giants such as ServiceNow, SALESFORCE, and ATLASSIAN, along with several productivity application offerings like DocuSign, Adobe, and Zoom, and other pervasive products like AWS in cloud computing, Cisco in networking, and VMware in infrastructure software. Just one tranche lower in citation grouping, several information security products show up, such as CrowdStrike, FORTINET, SPLUNK, F5 Networks, and KnowBe4. All see ascending net scores among the negative, flat, and positive Q2 IT spend groups. Several other offerings from major public cloud vendors also follow the ascending trend, such as Microsoft within container platforms, Dynamics, and servers. AWS within database and data warehousing. Google within cloud computing, analytics, BI, big data, and enterprise content management. And Oracle within database and data warehousing. And next up, high flyers such as Snowflake, Zscaler, and Cloudflare all see ascending net scores among these Q2 spend profiles, as are Workday in human capital management, MongoDB, and some SAP products like S/4HANA and infrastructure software. And lastly, among the lower citation vendors, Datadog, Elastic, Smartsheet, New Relic, and ZENDESK stand out with ascending net scores among ascending Q2 IT spend profiles. And with that, I'm going to say thank you for joining us for the Macro Survey Findings webinar before I kick it back to the velvety smooth tones of Dr. Darren Brabham to provide us with a quick update on ETR and sign us off. Back to you, Darren.
Remember that in addition to data reports and webinars from our 3 flagship quarterly surveys, the Technology Spending Intention Survey, the Emerging Technology Survey, and the Macro Views Survey, ETR has a growing body of qualitative research from our ETR Insights interview series. These one-on-one and panel interviews with IT decision makers help tell the stories behind the data, and a searchable transcript library and associated analyst-written summaries are accessible through the report's marketplace. We also do custom surveys and focus group panels and interviews for organizations seeking best-in-class bespoke research on a variety of enterprise IT topics. And lastly, don't forget ETR has its own expert network service called ETR Connect, where you can conduct one-on-one calls with members from our IT decision maker community. Be on the lookout for dozens of vendor-specific reports and the full recording from this webinar. Those are available on the ETR platform now. We never rest here at ETR. Polling for the Emerging Technology Survey starts soon. Until next time, take care.